Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode of Indie Impressions. My name is Nick and today we're going to be checking out something called Entomophobia by developer Scott Slusher. This is another game from the LD31 Game Jam with the theme of entire game on one screen. I haven't done a few of the LD games in a little bit here. I guess might as well return to them, and this is one that I couldn't pass up because every time I went to try and test this for the sound test I ended up playing through the entire thing, so that's usually a good sign. It's a top-down, multi-directional shooter, sort of something like The Binding of Isaac, only it's wave-based, and we'll be using our character here to try and eliminate wave after wave of enemy bugs while we collect power-ups to make us more powerful to finally face off with a dangerous and threatening foe. So I think we should probably just get right down to things. I should warn you, though, if you have any issues with motion sensitivity or motion sickness, you probably are going to have a hard time with this one. There's a lot of screen shake on it, as well as some flashing colors and such, but I wouldn't quite put it into the seizure warning category, although I think maybe, well, I guess if you're being really sensitive to it, perhaps. Anyway, let's get into things. Very simple controls here. We're using WASD to move around and our arrow keys to fire, and you can see our character here has a crossbow that seems to shoot some sort of psionic green arrows, which I really enjoy. They seem to do enough damage right off the bat to take out this first couple of waves of dudes. We've just run into an arrows up. That's what the green power-up does, and that basically doubles the amount of damage output that I can do. We just got another one here, and from playing this a couple of times, I have to say the power-ups seem to be in random order, which is actually really fun in a way, because it means every time you play it, you're going to get a slightly different experience. I think the waves might be in the same order, at least the similar enemies every time, but since you might end up not getting arrows power-ups for a while, you might end up with a run that's a lot more difficult. Whereas if you get a bunch of damage ups and arrow ups right off the bat, well, you're going to have a much easier time clearing out each group as they show up. In fact, I might end up with a really OP, like, crazy run with a ton of arrows. And this is making me wonder, you know, why isn't there more stuff like this out there? I'd love to see a bite-sized game like this with similar presentation where the premise of the game, I just picked up an extra HP container there. Basically, the premise of the game is sort of like all the challenge missions in The Binding of Isaac, and each like a mini game in this, or micro game in this, is another self-contained little, like, top-down twin-stick shooter with a slightly different idea behind it, or a slightly different framing behind it, or power-ups, or what have you. So I think there's a lot of different options and ways you could take this, and I think this is actually a really cool presentation for it, because it sort of harkens back to, you know, we're making the reference to the Game Boy Color here, obviously. And that's a time when games could be simple like this, and you didn't really have to question why doesn't it have insane production values, and why isn't there all this stuff going on. Well, it's constraint of the technology is what we usually say, and now we're kind of going back there for nostalgia, and in general, just to kind of harken back to a more quaint art style. And I think they did a very succinct job at getting to that point. I also like the fact that, like, the tutorialization, like, doesn't even need to occur at all. The game is just self-evident. There's just the little shout out to what you need to press as far as buttons go, and other than that, you're just free to give this a try. And we've gotten, what wave did that just say that was? Did that say 24? I think I just barely got to look at it, actually. Oh my gosh, it's the boss already. That was way faster. Okay, so I think there's some variance to how each run of this can go, because last time I fought the pistol shrimp, it was blue in color. And I think that's kind of interesting. I wonder, too, if I think the background I've seen be different as well. Did I win? Oh, I totally won. It's a little bit on the easy side. I wish it was a little bit more difficult, or that it went on for another 10 or so waves, because I think it's perfect as far as, like, if you just want a little quick hit of something fun to play with for a second, but I see so much potential in this, and there is a post-jam version of this that I'd like to try out as well, so maybe the developer did actually add something more onto that, I wonder. I just prefer to generally do the one that was actually entered into the LD Game Jam, just because, well, it's more indicative of what was done in the 48 hours, and I would say this is very well done for that. I didn't even really mention the fact that there was a whole, like, background framing thing going on, too. As we play, I'm sure you probably noticed, but there were sparks and sort of a mirroring of what's going on the screen happening in the background, which is kind of interesting, too. It's a nice way to get use out of the widescreen space without it seeming or feeling forced, and sort of keeps the presentation cohesive like that. I could see, though, where that might trigger people to have a little bit of difficulty in looking at the game, just because, like, why is there all this flashing coming from behind the Game Boy? I don't know. It's just sort of there out of the periphery in your vision, and maybe, I don't know, some people might be bothered by that. I'm not in particular. I also quite enjoy how all the bodies stack up on the ground as you're playing through this, too. Ends up creating a very interesting palette behind the character as things start to get more and more chaotic and hectic. you realize you're basically just walking entirely on the foes that have fallen in battle already. So as you probably noticed, it looks like I'm getting slightly different power-ups like I mentioned before. Still, I'd say this is definitely, well, they're all pretty much winnable runs. I think, again, that the difficulty is probably skewed a little bit towards the easy side. But, you know, like I said, it begs the question, why couldn't we have more? I'd love to see more of this exact thing that just elaborates and goes further and further. Imagine, even if it's just exactly this, break this up into, like, 1,000 waves. And make it so it's the type of game where you can play it in small fits and starts and play for a while and then, you know, get bored of it and then come back to it later and make a little bit more progress. And eventually it gets so difficult that, like, you're relying on, you know, hopefully creating some sort of a player build as you go, or, you know, maybe there'd be a little bit of customizability. Maybe you can unlock some stat points that could help augment your abilities if you're finding yourself deficient in one manner or another. I don't know, I just think there's so much potential for games with simple and accessible premises to be elaborated upon with some of the more modern conventions that you don't see in things like Game Boy Color games. I think that's, again, a sort of a facet that I think Rogue Legacy took and ran with really, really well. It's a game that is very easy to pick up and play, very accessible to understand. There's not a lot to it as far as complications, but it's got legs and it'll last you a long time. And graphically, it's reasonably simplistic as well, but it definitely gets the job done. It looks good, it plays well. And it's just a lot of fun. So, you know, this is definitely that. This is a lot of fun to play. You can tell I enjoy it because I went back and played the whole thing a second time on the video just because I like the way it feels. And I think that's probably a good thing. Anyway, I think that's going to pretty much cover us for Entomophobia. I know the joke that you're all going to make in the comments. Can't really get around it, huh? Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. You can feel free to try this out yourself. There will be a link, of course, in the description for this. I'd love to hear your opinions. If you'd like to leave a comment, I do read all of my comments, and I'd love to have any kind of discussion you like about some of the things I mentioned. If you'd like to see more games with sort of nostalgic throwback feels to them, more accessibility with modern gameplay conventions tossed on top, I think that actually feels really good. I shouldn't say tossed on top, but, you know, weaved into the gameplay. In the core mechanics, I think is always a nice thing to see, but I'd love to hear your opinion on that topic, as well as how you think the presentation was done for this. The fact that the designer chose to go for a 3D map with a 2D game inside of it, I think is pretty cool as far as an idea goes, but let me know what you think, and we'll keep the discussion going as long as possible. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like on it. It does help keep the series going, and be sure to come back again tomorrow, because new episodes of Indie Impressions go up every single day without exception, so there will be one again tomorrow. If you like the idea of finding out about a new artistic, original, or unique indie game every single day, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all later. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Hope you have a fantastic night.